Hey everybody, this is Gary Matheny. I hope you all are doing well. This is episode 10 of my series on liberty and God and power and patriotism. Well, today what we're going to do in episode 10, we're going to explore the tension or the stress between liberty and patriotism. I understand there may be some people out there that go, well, what's the tension? They're both the same or they're very complementary of each other. But sometimes there is a tension in certain circumstances between patriotism and liberty. So the title of today is Fine Differences Lead to Big Consequences. If you look at an analogy between a skyscraper, it is so very, very important that a skyscraper be rightly anchored. The foundation is all even keel, so that you can build upon this skyscraper, and you can go up floor after floor after floor, and have everything nice and even. But if you make even small mistakes early on in the process, they become harder and harder to cure the higher you go up, because small mistakes can be exaggerated into bigger mistakes because you don't have what? You don't have the right foundation. So when you build big buildings, you need to have the right foundation. And in some respects, small differences in the understanding of patriotism can lead you to big differences in understanding liberty and understanding how we should perceive the society and government around us. Well, I'm going to start off with something that struck me in relating to patriotism. So I'm going to go all the way back to around 1970. This is while I was in high school. And we were in the throes of the Vietnam War. And there were two cliches which were proffered at that time, one by the right and the other by the left. And they both appealed to our sense of patriotism. The saying, bumper sticker, which was very prevalent at the time, was America, love it or leave it. America, love it or leave it. And the one that was proffered from the left to counter love it or leave it was America, change it or lose it. America, change it or lose it. And so basically there was a sense of appeal by both the right and left to our innate preferences, our devotion to our country through patriotism. And so one particular cliche or phrase that is popular in modern society, and it seems to mean so many different things to so many different people, it almost lacks any substantial meaning. And and that is protest is the greatest form of patriotism. Protest is the greatest form of patriotism. And so what does that mean? What is the form of protest? What do we mean when we say protest? It means different things to different people. For instance, Michael Moore, a well-known documentarian and popular on the political left, he has actually advocated for violence in protest in our current cultural climate. And he uses as an illustration of that, when you go back all the way to the 1920s and the 1930s, where there was violent protests in order to enhance or advance the labor movement. And there were violent protests. You had labor organizers and obviously members of labor unions that were pitted against typically not the United States government, or for that matter, not even local governments, but private security agencies like the Pinkertons. The Pinkertons were, in some respects, a private army, using the word army loosely, that was employed by employers through contract to thwart the violence that was tendered. Now, it's probably tendered by both sides, and so you can't necessarily say that this violence, it came all from the Union members, and you can't say all the violence came from the Pinkertons, but it was definitely violent. And Michael Moore, to the best of my knowledge, has not pinpointed whether he's only talking about property damage. It seems like we have a lot of tolerance for property damage in the United States. For instance, in the city of St. Louis, which is 75 miles north of where I live, back in the riots that happened in the summer of 2020, and there was millions of dollars worth of property damage in those riots. And basically, the prosecutor for St. Louis City at the time dismissed all the charges against the rioters. So some of these rioters were arrested, police reports were made, they were forwarded to the prosecutor's office, and I can't remember whether there was initial filings, but whatever, they weren't pursued. So none of the rioters were pursued. And typically it was property damage in a riot. There are some isolated incidents of physical damage to your fellow citizen, but normally it was property damage and it never got prosecuted. And so basically, what do we mean when we talk about the form of protest? And then another further complication is what ends. If we believe that protest is the highest form of patriotism or the greatest form of patriotism, what are we talking about the ends? I am convinced that there is a certain group of people in our country that just love to protest. And they don't even know necessarily what they're protesting. They just love to join in a protest. But there has to be some ends. And so what are the ends? And here's my question. What if the ends directed by protest lessen our liberty? And so if they lessen liberty of the United States citizen, then the ends probably are not justified. And so we have two key words in that statement that basically can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Violent protests, what are the ends? How does it affect our liberty? And my point of view is that if it diminishes our liberty, then the ends are not justified, because liberty will trump the ends. So what do we mean when we talk about the definition of patriotism? It does suggest a certain love and devotion towards your country. But what specifically are we talking about when we talk about patriotism? What love and devotion are we directed towards? Well, for instance, are we talking about a generalized patriotism towards our country, and that generalized patriotism allows for both the right and the left to appeal to our sense of patriotism, like America love it or leave it versus America change it or lose it? The various political sides appeal to our generalized sense of patriotism, tugging in our heartstrings and trying to appeal to us in that patriotic realm. Or what about the United States government? When we talk about patriotism, is there a distinction to be made between patriotism towards the United States government, which governs us and manages us, imposes taxation, rules and regulations, etc., and etc., supposedly for the common good? And so is a generalized sense of patriotism the same as a patriotism directed towards the United States government? Third, what about something a little bit more subtle, so to speak? And that's patriotism directed towards we the people. The we the people patriotism moves in further than the mere government structure that manages us, and directs itself towards we the people of the United States. The focus is off of politics, politicians, Washington, D.C., institutions of power, and the focus is on we, the citizens of the United States, of our patriotism directed towards we, the people. And so one of the important distinctions that I can make just came up within a few weeks ago. I've been watching on YouTube diaries of German soldiers fought on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. I think it was the winter of 1942. So put yourself in that context for a moment. The Eastern Front was the front where, at the beginning, the Nazis were making huge gains across Eastern Europe, huge gains even into Russia. But that old nemesis, which Napoleon and others have run into, and that is the Russian winter. And so basically the Russians, or the Soviets, they were willing to just keep pouring resources into defeating the Nazis. And part of what they've done, they were able to interfere with the supply lines to the German or Nazi army. And so for some reason, it was fairly common when German soldiers were killed, those who happened to have a diary, they were collected and put in the Soviet archives, and then only, I don't know how many years ago, but they were released for the public, and now they're showing up by narrative on YouTube. But anyhow, this one particular German soldier who wrote a lot about the depravity of war and the deprivation of war and that winter war where all you do is amp up all the problems associated with battle. You amp it up because it's 0-degree weather outside. And so you're freezing to death. And there are stories in some of these diaries where people had frostbitten feet so bad that they couldn't even get their shoes off. And yet, most of those soldiers fought on, even though some of them lost the ability to walk more than just a few steps. And so in this one particular diary, this particular German soldier went on at length about how terrible war was, about the deprivation and just how bad it was, particularly the winter war that he was in. And then in the midst of that, the way the German soldiers did it was they'd rotate into the front lines for 30 days, and then you'd rotate to the back lines for 30 days. And the Germans attempted to keep on rotating fresh troops in. Every 30 days, you rotate out, you get R&R, you recoup a little bit, and then you rotate back in at the end of 30 days. And so on the back lines at some point, and Adolf Hitler showed up on the back lines, not the front lines, and he gave a rousing speech according to the German soldier. And the German soldiers were inspired to fight on and fight further because of Adolf Hitler's magnetism and his rousing speech. They were ready to shoulder the burden even further and fight even harder for the fatherland, Nazi Germany. And so here you have a juxtaposition. You have the depravity, the deprivation, the agony of war, particularly in the winter. And then compared to that, you got a rousing speech from Adolf Hitler, which greatly encouraged the soldiers. And so my question is, if warfare is that horrible, which it is, it's horrible. If it's that horrible, why are you excited about listening to a speech from a guy that put you there? Who put you all on that Eastern Front? Who put you, Mr. German soldier, on the Eastern Front? Well, it was Adolf Hitler. And so a misplaced version of patriotism. They thought that devotion to Adolf Hitler, devotion to the fatherland, trumped all other aspects, and it landed them in the middle of war-torn, battle-struck winter war of, I believe, 1942. And so patriotism can exploit you. It's not all healthy just because it's patriotism. That's why it's sometimes important to listen to what's being really said and see what form of patriotism is really appealed to, because we all, I think, want to be patriots. We all love America, but what do we say when we meet that? And so basically, we need to think also in terms of what is occurring with patriotism now in the modern era. Of course, it's 2024. And so let's look at some of the forms of patriotism associated with progressive politics. And progressive politics probably doesn't need a lengthy explanation. It is generally associated with those policies which advance the role of government, which advance socialism, which advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, all the current notions associated with making things right in our society. And so one of the things that you hear from progressives is being on the right side of history. And when they say it, I don't mean being on the right wing of history. They're on the right side of history. They are convinced they are on the right side of history. And so basically, what does that mean? It has little or no real meaning. Well, let's just look at some of the policies that they're currently advancing. And one is called DEI, which a lot of us are familiar with. I'm in the legal profession. Every year, as part of my ethics training, I have to go to a session that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it started off a few years ago when they mandated this to have respect for one another. And I'm all for respect. I believe in having respect for our fellow human being. But it has become more and more, virtually every year, to have a more encompassing definition, meandering deposition or definition, where you're left, thinking, where is this going? Where is it going to end? And so, for instance, during this last one that I attended on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they went into diversity. And the minorities that are designed to be protected by diversity keeps growing. And so we have diversity associated with various minorities. That can be racial minorities, that can be ethnic minorities. Sometimes it covers gender. And then it's grown over the last, 10 or 20 years to include the LGBT and Q community. And this latest one I saw advocating for was neurodiversity. And they specifically talked about autism, that there apparently is that minority group out there where equity and inclusion needs to be expanded to include neurodiversity. And so my response to that is why stop at neurodiversity? Why not cardio diversity? People with heart conditions, they're at a certain disadvantage. They can't work as hard a lot of times because they give out. They can't handle stress as much as the others in society because, it increases heart symptoms or whatever. So why not cardio diversity? Well, how about this? How about ortho diversity, orthopedics diversity, ortho diversity? How about people that have bad limbs? How about people sitting in wheelchairs? How about people that can't, lift weights like they used to and can't do a wide variety of jobs in the marketplace? Why are they currently being excluded. And then ultimately, how about biodiversity? Biodiversity. And so, who is to say that a human being is morally superior to an animal? And so, maybe we should include in this concept of diversity not just humankind, but all kind. Why not animal, vegetable, and maybe even mineral if we take it far enough? Considering all these people, all these kinds in the meaning of diversity. And so the question is, even though I'm being ironic, the question is, where does it end? And I don't know where it ends. I'm not sure they know where it ends. All I know is that if the goals are toward shared outcomes, equal outcomes, that is a real problem because people are differently gifted, they're differently motivated, they have different ambitions. Some of them are willing to work harder than others. And in a free market society, you're rewarded for what you can produce, what you bring to the table, and how well you bring it to the table. But with shared outcomes or equal outcomes, it creates another set of issues. How do you implement all this? How do you implement all these credits, exemptions, subsidies, affirmative actions? And you go on and on and on where people are not being treated equally because equity has taken over equality and we think they're the same thing. People should be treated equally in a free society and not one given a preference over another. But we haven't realized that yet, and hopefully that'll come further and further in the sight as things go on. All I can say for the time being basically is equal outcomes, shared outcomes, ultimately deprives you of a great deal of liberty because the only way you can bring that about is through a lot of rules and regulations and a lot of inequality in its application. So let's look at liberty. We talked about patriotism, and let's take a look at liberty. And I'll give you, and I have in the past because liberty is an important subject to me. So let's go to a couple of dictionary definitions. The Oxford Dictionary. The state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. Here's the Merriam-Webster short definition. The meaning of liberty is the quality of state of being free. And here's the Legal Information Institute. Liberty means freedom from arbitrary and unreasonable restraint upon an individual. The Cambridge Dictionary. Freedom to live as you wish or go where you want. Vocabulary.com. Liberty is a kind of freedom, whether it's freedom from tyranny, freedom from confinement, or simply the freedom of choice. Collins Dictionary. Liberty is the freedom to live your life in the way that you want without interference from other people or the authorities. Britannica. The state or condition of people who are able to act and speak freely. Freedom. So freedom and liberty are synonyms with each other because they use freedom a lot of times to describe liberty. And so you kind of get a flavor there of what liberty is. I contend that you're dealing with two abstract subjects, patriotism and liberty. But I think that patriotism has a great deal of fluidity. It means so many different things to so many different people. But I think liberty has less fluidity about it. Liberty has a better and heartier, robust part to it. In other words, if we were to ask people what liberty means, probably the majority of Americans would come in somewhere in here of the definitions that I just gave. If we can't ask people in America to describe patriotism, it would probably be all over the board. So what does liberty entail for us? What does it involve? Liberty gives everyone the opportunity to succeed or fail. You want the opportunity to fail? Liberty gives you that opportunity, but it also gives you the opportunity to succeed. One of the problems with equity is not only do you not have the opportunity to succeed, but you lose the opportunity to fail. So liberty gives you both sides of the spectrum. It creates room around you to make choices. It creates room around you to make choices. It gives you the opportunity to make decisions that affect your own life. It allows for honest inquiry and honest opinion. And so, do we still have that in the USA as a freewheeling type of expression where people are honest and make honest inquiry and have honest opinions? And I'm not talking about mean and rude and things along that nature. I'm just thinking in terms of, what do you think? What's your opinion about this? There should be room in America for us to have an honest inquiry and an honest opinion. And referencing Jerry Seinfeld, and I was a big fan of Seinfeld, and love the series. I love Jerry Seinfeld because he is an honest dealer. He'll tell you what he thinks. But he thinks because we are so woke, so politically correct, so sensitive, so afraid of being corrected by others because we're not lining up in a particular fashion as far as what we think, what we do, how we speak, etc., that we're losing our sense of humor. And he cited that if you look back in the 80s and 90s, all the great television series and even the first decade here of 2000, great television series, situation comedies, including Seinfeld, The Office, 31 Rock or whatever it's called. I watched that too. And so basically, they're not there now. They may be a few isolated ones there, but they're not hugely popular where everybody sets aside Thursday night to go watch your favorite sitcom, because we have become a humorless society. And that bothers Jerry Seinfeld a lot. And it bothers me a lot because we need to have a sense of humor to have a successful life. So who is in the best position to make decisions that affect your life? It's an obvious question, but the answers, elude us in some respects because a lot of people don't really get it. Who is in the best position to make the best decisions for your life? You. Yeah, it's you. And so basically, freedom and liberty puts you in a position for you to make the best decisions for you. And that's a beautiful association with liberty. Liberty gives you the opportunity to make choices. So, liberty is at risk. As we become more and more a material world, and when I say material world, I mean the concept associated with science, measured, objectively quantified. In other words, what you see, what you hear, what you feel. And many of these things are important and relevant to life. Science is important. But at the same time, we lose the ability to think in abstract terms, things that cannot be described solely within measurable terms. Like, for instance, patriotism, it's an abstract term. Liberty is an abstract term. And there are threats to liberty. Liberty is no longer advocated on a large scale. If you think about it, we have a Black History Month in February. We have in June LGBT and Q month every June. And liberty is celebrated one day a year, July 4th. And during that one day, we spend time with our family. We go to the river. We grill and chill. And we enjoy ourselves. And I'm all for that 100%. But I am an advocate that liberty needs a month. We need a Liberty Month, and July would be a good month for Liberty Month because we need to grow and understand in our understanding of that abstraction, which is liberty. It's an abstract concept, and we miss it on July 4th because we're so busy having fun. We love the fireworks display. Like I said, I love all that, but we're not really enhancing our understanding of liberty's importance in our life. Unfortunately, the way that liberty operates, it's sorely missed when you lose it. And when you have it, it's sorely ignored. So we ignore liberty when we have liberty, but when we lose it, oh man, are we deprived? And we go around saying, "Woe is me, woe is we. How did we allow this to happen?" So let's think in terms of the confusion between the United States government and we the people. In the name of liberty, sometimes fellow citizens can persecute other citizens. In other words, we're all trying to protect what our definition is of America. And some people are trying to protect democracy, like right now on the left. There's almost a hysteria about protecting democracy. And if Donald Trump is reelected as president, democracy will go down the drain. He's a threat, an existential threat to democracy, on and on and on and on. So we arm one group of citizens to persecute another group of citizens in the name of preserving democracy or preserving liberty. One group of citizens knows better than another group of citizens. So let's take a particular look at we the people, which I'm an advocate for, if you haven't figured that out yet, versus the United States government. So what is the greater risk to our liberty as we sit here today in 2024? What is the greatest risk to our liberty? Is it Russia? How much are they depriving us of our liberty? How about North Korea? China. Well, we can make the case that China is evil, especially evil, because there's a lot of things going on that are almost inexplicable, like huge purchases of property in the Midwest and elsewhere. A lot of things going on about China, but are they depriving us of liberty, at least as we're sitting here today? Maybe not. Iran's terrible, but not so terrible we can't spend or send $1 billion in a boat to them. Are they depriving us of liberty? How about white supremacy? You listen to some people on the political left, white supremacy is running rampant. Very seldom do we hear incidents involving persecution of minorities by white supremacy. Maybe there's minor offenses. There are things that are done intentionally or intentionally that hurt people, but we're talking about persecution. We're talking about loss of liberty because of white supremacy. Not a big factor. How about global warming? Is global warming causing us to lose liberty? Well, it can if it reaches a certain point, because all this economic pressure, like to use electric cars instead of gasoline-powered cars, will cause a loss of liberty. But is it really causing us a loss of liberty as we sit here today? So, what is the number one threat to our liberty today? I contend that it's the United States government. And I'm not a rebel. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not advocating violence. But who taxes us? Who collects our taxes? Who implements all kinds of various policies that affect our ability to live life? Who does this stuff? Who is growing more and more larger over time with a larger and larger footprint in our life, in our own backyard? It's the United States government. It is growing like a leviathan, 35 trillion, that's with a T, trillion national debt. And so the only way to get the Leviathan under control is to starve it. You starve the beast. And that means that you deprive it of some power, and that means you stop funding at ridiculous levels. Do we really think that spending more money is building a better society? $35 trillion down the road, shouldn't we have a great society? Shouldn't there be no homeless people in LA or wherever? Society is getting more and more unruly, and yet we're spending more and more money. The two are not consistent with each other. Just because you're spending more money, it does not necessarily follow that you have a better society. So I would say, when you're comparing liberty with patriotism, when there is a conflict between the two, always choose liberty. Always choose liberty. And so a patriotism, like this German soldier who was very patriotic towards Adolf Hitler and the fatherland, and he chose his devotion to that principle, to that belief over liberty, so much so that he was not only willing to sacrifice his life, but he was utterly willing to live in this huge hellhole of the Winter War. One last thought. Liberty is a friend of humility. One of the best aspects associated with humility is that you come to the conclusion that you are not any better than anybody else. And if people can come to that conclusion, that you are not any better than anybody else, then the very freedom and liberty that you strive for yourself, you can extend to other people. Well, that's it for today. I hope everybody had a good time. Tune in to the Liberty Liberty Observatory for our next episode. This concludes episode 10. Thank you very much.